The accusation came on a Tuesday morning when Hazel Reed's hands glowed faintly amber while she tried to save the blacksmith's dying son, and by noon the whole town of Gunnison, Colorado, had branded her a witch. It was late spring in 1877, and Hazel had lived quietly on the outskirts of town for 3 years since her father's death, keeping to herself and tending the small herb garden that provided remedies for those brave enough to seek her help in the dead of night. She had always known her gift was dangerous. The warmth that spread through her palms when she touched the sick or injured, the way wounds seemed to close faster under her care, the intuition that told her which plants would heal and which would harm. Her grandmother had possessed the same abilities and had warned her mother to keep Hazel hidden, but desperation had a way of making people reckless. Young Timothy Walsh had been trampled by a spooked horse, his chest crushed, his breathing shallow and wet with blood. His mother had come screaming to Hazel's door before dawn, begging, pleading, offering everything she had. Hazel had gone despite knowing better, despite the voice in her head that sounded like her grandmother warning her that fear made people cruel. She had knelt beside the boy in the smithy, placed her hands on his broken ribs and let the warmth flow through her. The glow had been subtle at first, barely visible in the dim lamplight, but as the bones began to knit and the boy's breathing eased, the light had grown brighter, unmistakable, impossible to explain away. The boy's father had seen it, then his mother, then the neighbors who had gathered in the pre-dawn darkness, drawn by the commotion. Hazel had felt their gazes shift from gratitude to horror in the space of a heartbeat. She had pulled her hands away, but it was too late. The word witch had been whispered first by old Mrs. Hendricks, then repeated louder by Joseph Walsh himself, the very man whose son she had just saved. By the time the sun rose fully over the Elk Mountains, a mob had formed outside Hazel's small cabin. She stood inside, her back pressed against the rough wooden door, listening to the angry voices demanding she come out and face judgment. The sheriff, a weak-willed man named Tucker who bent to whatever wind blew strongest through town, called out that she had until sunset to leave Gunnison or face trial by the town council. Everyone knew what that meant. The last woman tried for witchcraft in these parts had been hanged from the oak tree in the town square, her body left swinging for 3 days as a warning. Hazel gathered what she could carry, a worn leather satchel stuffed with dried herbs, a few pieces of clothing, her grandmother's journal filled with remedies and warnings, the small tintype photograph of her parents on their wedding day, and the little money she had hidden beneath a loose floorboard. Her hands shook as she worked, and she hated herself for the tears that blurred her vision. She had saved that boy's life. She had done nothing but help people, asking for little in return, and this was her reward. As the sun climbed higher, Hazel slipped out the back window and into the forest that crept up the mountainside behind her property. She could hear them breaking down her front door as she ran, could hear the crash of furniture being overturned, glass shattering, her father's carefully built home being destroyed by fear and ignorance. She did not look back. She climbed higher into the wilderness, following a deer trail that wound between spruce and aspen trees, her breath coming hard in the thin mountain air. She had no plan beyond survival. The high country was dangerous, especially alone. Grizzly bears roamed these forests, mountain lions hunted in the twilight hours, and a spring snowstorm could sweep in without warning, even in May. But Hazel knew more about surviving in the wild than most women her age. Her father had been a trapper before settling in Gunnison, and he had taught her to read animal tracks, to find water, to recognize which plants were safe to eat. She would need every bit of that knowledge now. By late afternoon, her legs burned with exhaustion and her lungs ached from the altitude. She had climbed perhaps 2,000 feet above the town, following the trail until it petered out into trackless forest. She needed to find shelter before dark, needed to put more distance between herself and anyone who might follow. The mob's anger would cool eventually, but there were always a few who would pursue vengeance beyond reason. She had seen it before in other towns, heard the stories of women hunted down and killed far from any law or witness. She was searching for a cave or overhang when she smelled smoke, not the acrid smoke of a wildfire, but the pleasant scent of burning pine, a campfire. Hazel froze, every instinct screaming at her to hide, but curiosity and desperation pulled her forward. Whoever had made that fire knew how to survive up here. Maybe they would help. Maybe they would turn her in. She had to risk it. Night was coming, and she had no shelter, no fire, and the temperature was already dropping. She moved quietly through the trees, placing each foot with care until she saw the source of the smoke. A cabin stood in a small clearing, solidly built from thick pine logs with a stone chimney from which the smoke rose. It was not a temporary shelter, but a permanent home, well maintained and clearly lived in. A large wood pile stood covered near the side of the cabin, and animal pelts hung stretched on frames in the late afternoon sun. This was a trapper's home, someone who lived far from town by choice. Before she could decide whether to approach or flee, a voice spoke from behind her, deep and calm, but with an edge that made her heart skip. "You are a long way from anywhere, and you are moving like someone being chased." Hazel spun around, her hand flying to her chest. The man who stood 10 feet away was the largest human being she had ever seen. He towered well over 6 feet, with shoulders so broad they seemed to block out the forest behind him. His arms, visible beneath the rolled sleeves of a worn buckskin shirt, were corded with muscle that spoke of years of hard labor and survival. Dark hair hung past his shoulders, partially tied back with a strip of leather, and a thick beard covered the lower half of his face. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, pale blue, sharp, and assessing her with an intelligence that belied his rough appearance. I did not mean to trespass," Hazel said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I will go." That was not an answer to my question. He did not move closer, but he shifted his weight slightly, and she saw the rifle held loosely in his left hand, pointed at the ground, but ready. "What are you running from?" Hazel hesitated. Lying seemed pointless. This man could probably track her trail back to Gunnison if he wanted, and something in his direct gaze made her think he would know if she tried to deceive him. "The town. They think I am a witch." She expected mockery or anger or fear. Instead, his expression did not change at all. He studied her for a long moment, taking in her disheveled appearance, the satchel clutched in her white-knuckled hands, the exhaustion and fear she could not quite hide. "Are you?" The question was so blunt, so matter-of-fact, that Hazel almost laughed. "I can heal people, sometimes. My hands get warm, and wounds close faster. I saved a boy's life this morning, and his father called me witch for it. So you are something. Whether that something is witch or healer seems like a matter of perspective." He finally moved, slinging the rifle over his shoulder with practiced ease. "My name is Finn Shepard. You can stay in my cabin tonight. Tomorrow, if you are still being hunted, you can move on. If not, we will talk." Hazel stared at him, unable to process the sudden offer. "You would help me? You do not even know me. I know you are exhausted, frightened, and alone in country that will kill you if you do not know what you are doing. I know you ran from people who would rather hurt you than be grateful you saved a child." Finn turned toward the cabin, clearly expecting her to follow. "And I know I have been alone on this mountain for 3 years without anything interesting happening. A woman marked as a witch is at least something different." She should have been insulted by his casual tone, but instead, she found herself almost smiling despite everything. There was something refreshing about his directness, his complete lack of the superstitious fear that had driven her from town. She followed him to the cabin, her legs trembling with exhaustion now that she had stopped moving. The inside of the cabin was surprisingly comfortable. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, with a fire burning low. Furs covered the floor and the single large bed in the corner. Shelves lined the walls, holding supplies, tools, and cooking implements. A rough-hewn table and 2 chairs occupied the center of the room, and bundles of dried herbs and meat hung from the rafters. It smelled of wood smoke, leather, and pine, a masculine scent, but not unpleasant. Sit before you fall down," Finn said, gesturing to one of the chairs. He moved to the fireplace and swung a kettle over the flames. "When did you last eat?" Hazel realized she could not remember. Yesterday evening, perhaps. She had been too anxious to eat breakfast before the Walsh boy's mother had arrived. "I'm not certain." He grunted and began pulling food from a wooden box near the hearth. Within minutes, he had set before her a plate of venison jerky, hard bread, and dried apples. It was simple fare, but her stomach clenched with hunger at the sight of it. She ate slowly, trying to maintain some dignity, while Finn prepared tea from pine needles and some herbs she did not recognize. "The town will likely send someone after you," Finn said, settling into the other chair with his own mug of tea. Sheriff Tucker is a coward, but there are always a few men eager to prove their righteousness by hunting down a supposed witch. They will come within a day or two." "Then I should leave now," Hazel said, starting to rise despite her exhaustion. "I will not bring trouble to your home. Sit down." His voice was not loud, but it carried absolute authority. Hazel found herself sinking back into the chair. "I did not say I was afraid of them. I said they would come. There is a difference. You are safe here tonight. Tomorrow we will deal with whatever arrives." "Why are you helping me?" The question burst out before she could stop it. "You do not know me. You do not owe me anything. For all you know, I truly am a witch who will curse you or worse." Finn looked at her over the rim of his mug, those pale blue eyes thoughtful. "Then bewitch me. I am willing." The words hung in the air between them, and Hazel felt something shift in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with her healing gift. He was either the bravest man she had ever met or the most foolish, and she could not decide which. "You cannot mean that." "I do not say things I do not mean." He set down his mug and leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking under his weight. "I left civilization because I was tired of people's stupidity and cruelty. I came to this mountain to live by my own rules, to hunt and trap and not answer to anyone. But I'm not so far removed from humanity that I have forgotten what is right. You healed a dying boy, and they called you evil for it. That tells me everything I need to know about who deserves help." Hazel felt tears prick her eyes again, but this time they were not born of fear or despair. "Thank you," she whispered. Finn nodded once, then stood and moved to a trunk in the corner. He pulled out a heavy wool blanket and tossed it to her. "You can have the bed tonight. I will take the floor." "I cannot take your bed," Hazel protested, but he was already laying out furs near the fireplace, creating a pallet that looked surprisingly comfortable. "You are injured, exhausted, and half your size. You get the bed. Do not argue with me on this." His tone left no room for debate. Hazel was too tired to fight. She moved to the bed, which was indeed much more comfortable than it looked, the furs and blankets soft and warm. She lay down fully clothed, her satchel clutched against her chest, and watched Finn as he checked the door, banked the fire, and finally settled onto his makeshift bed. He moved with the efficient grace of a man completely comfortable in his environment, wasting no motion. "Finn," she said softly into the darkness. "Yes? They might try to hang me if they catch me, or burn me. I've heard stories about what men do to accused witches. They will not catch you here, and if they try, they will learn that I am far more dangerous than any supposed witch." His voice was calm, matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing the weather rather than potential violence. "Sleep, Hazel. You are safe tonight." She did not know why she believed him, but she did. Despite everything that had happened, despite the fear and exhaustion, she felt the tension slowly drain from her body. For the first time since the amber light had glowed from her hands, she let herself relax. She was safe. At least for tonight, she was safe. When Hazel woke, pale morning light was filtering through the cabin's single window, and the smell of cooking meat made her stomach growl. She sat up, disoriented for a moment, then remembered everything. The cabin, the mountain man, the offer of sanctuary. She looked around and saw Finn at the fireplace, tending a skillet of what looked like trout. "There is water in the basin if you want to wash," he said without turning around, "and the privy is out back, marked by the path." Hazel's cheeks flushed at the intimate mention of such necessities, but she was grateful for his practicality. She used the water basin, splashing cold water on her face and doing her best to tame her hair, then ventured outside to find the privy. The morning air was crisp and cold, her breath misting in front of her face. The view from Finn's clearing was spectacular. She could see down the valley toward Gunnison in the distance, a small cluster of buildings beside the river, and beyond that, the snow-capped peaks of the Elk Mountains rising into a brilliant blue sky. When she returned to the cabin, Finn had breakfast laid out. Fresh trout, more of the hard bread toasted over the fire, and wild onions he must have gathered earlier. They ate in comfortable silence, and Hazel found herself stealing glances at him. In the morning light, she could see him more clearly. He was probably in his late 20s, not much older than her own 23 years. Scars marked his hands and forearms, the kind earned through hard work and dangerous living. But there was nothing cruel in his face, nothing that spoke of the meanness she had seen in so many men. "You keep looking at me like you were trying to figure something out," Finn said, startling her. "I am trying to understand why you live alone up here. You are clearly capable. You could have a life in town, a trade, a family. I had a life in town once, in Wyoming, not Colorado. I was a blacksmith, had a small shop, even had a woman I planned to marry. His voice was even, but something in his eyes darkened. Then, a rich rancher decided he wanted her instead. He made accusations against me, said I had cheated him, stolen from him. His men beat me half to death and ran me out of town. The woman I loved did not even defend me. She married the rancher 3 months later. I am sorry, Hazel said softly. Do not be. It taught me what I needed to know about people. The strong take what they want, and the weak let them do it. I decided I did not want to be either. So I came here, to the high country, where a man is measured by his ability to survive, not by how much money or influence he has. He met her eyes directly. And I learned that sometimes the things people call evil or dangerous are just things they do not understand. Like your healing gift. Before Hazel could respond, Finn held up a hand, his head cocked slightly. Someone is coming. 3 horses, moving fast. They will be here within the hour. How can you possibly know that? Hazel asked, but even as she spoke, she heard it too. The faint sound of hoofbeats in the distance echoing through the forest. Stay inside, Finn said, standing and reaching for his rifle. Let me handle this. They are coming for me, Hazel said, her heart beginning to race. You should not fight them. I will go with them, face whatever comes. You have done enough. Finn turned to her, and for the first time, she saw something fierce in his expression, something almost frightening in its intensity. No one is taking you anywhere. You healed a child and harmed no one. I will not stand by and let ignorance and fear win. Now stay inside and trust me. Hazel wanted to argue, but the look on his face stopped her. She moved to the window instead, peering out through the gap in the shutters, watching as 3 men rode into the clearing. She recognized them immediately. Sheriff Tucker, Joseph Walsh, and Luther Barnes, one of the town's most vocal church leaders. All 3 were armed. Finn walked out to meet them, his rifle cradled casually in his arms, but clearly ready. That is far enough, gentlemen. State your business. Sheriff Tucker cleared his throat, his mustache twitching nervously. Finn Shepard? We are looking for a woman, Hazel Reed. We have reason to believe she came this direction. Have you seen her? I might have, Finn said calmly. Why are you looking for her? She is accused of witchcraft, Joseph Walsh burst out, his face red with anger or perhaps shame. She put some kind of spell on my boy, made unnatural light come from her hands. She needs to face trial. Trial, Finn repeated, his voice flat. You mean a mob who has already decided she is guilty? Tell me, Joseph, how is your boy today? The question seemed to catch Walsh off guard. He is well. He is healed. But that does not change what she did. She saved his life, and you want to kill her for it. That seems like poor gratitude. Finn's voice remained calm, but there was an edge to it now. The answer is no. She stays here. You can return to town and tell everyone that Hazel Reed is under my protection. Luther Barnes urged his horse forward slightly, his hand moving toward the pistol at his hip. You are harboring a witch, Shepard. That makes you complicit in her evil. Step aside, or we will take her by force. The movement was so fast that Hazel almost missed it. One moment Finn was standing relaxed, the next his rifle was up and aimed directly at Barnes, the hammer cocked. Move that hand another inch toward that pistol, and I will put a bullet through your skull. I am not a religious man, Barnes, but I am certain I can send you to meet your maker before you clear leather. Barnes froze, his face going pale. Sheriff Tucker held up both hands in a placating gesture. Now hold on, Finn. There is no need for violence. We are lawmen conducting official business. You are a mob pretending to be lawmen, Finn corrected, and here is how this is going to work. You're going to turn your horses around and ride back to Gunnison. You're going to tell everyone that Hazel Reed is gone, disappeared into the high country, and that pursuing her further would be a waste of time and resources. If anyone comes back up this mountain looking for her, I will assume they mean harm, and I will respond accordingly. Am I making myself clear? You cannot threaten us, Walsh blustered. We have the law on our side. The law, Finn said with contempt. The law that says a woman can be killed because frightened men do not understand her gift? I do not recognize that law, but I recognize the law of the wilderness. Up here, strength and will determine who survives, and I promise you, I have more of both than the three of you combined." He lowered his rifle slightly but kept it ready. "Leave, now, before my patience runs out." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Sheriff Tucker, perhaps sensing that Finn was deadly serious, turned his horse. "This is not over, Shepard. The town council will hear about this. Tell them whatever you want. I do not come to Gunnison, and I do not answer to your council. Now get off my land." The three men rode away, Walsh and Barnes casting dark looks over their shoulders, but none of them willing to challenge Finn further. Hazel watched until they disappeared into the trees, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. When she finally stepped outside, her legs were shaking. "You just made enemies of half the town for me," she said, her voice trembling. "They will not forget this." Finn turned to her, his expression softening slightly. "I already had no love for the town. This changes nothing for me. But it changes everything for you. You cannot go back to Gunnison, not now, maybe not ever. The question is, what do you want to do?" Hazel looked around at the clearing, at the solid cabin, at the wilderness stretching in every direction. "I have nowhere else to go. My mother died years ago. My father is dead. I have no family, no friends who would risk helping me. I have nothing." "That is not true," Finn said quietly. "You have your gift, your knowledge of healing, and if you want it, you have a place here. I could use someone who knows herbs and medicine. The winters are hard and injuries happen, and—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I would not mind the company. It gets lonely on the mountain." "You are offering me a home? Just like that?" "I'm offering you a choice. You can stay here, help me with the trapping and preserving and surviving, learn to live in the high country. Or you can move on, try to find another town far enough away that the accusations have not reached. But I think you know which option gives you a better chance at real safety." Hazel did know. She had been running her whole life in one way or another, hiding her gift, living in fear of discovery. Here, with this strange, solitary man who had faced down armed riders without hesitation to protect her, she might finally have a chance at something different, not hiding, not running, just living. "I will stay," she said. "If you truly mean the offer, I will stay. I can earn my keep. I know plants and medicine, and I can learn hunting and trapping. I will not be a burden." Something that might have been a smile tugged at the corner of Finn's mouth. "I did not think you would be. Come on then. If you are going to survive up here, there is a lot you need to learn. We will start with teaching you to shoot properly." The following weeks fell into a pattern that Hazel found surprisingly comfortable. Finn was a patient but exacting teacher, showing her how to handle firearms, how to track game, how to read weather signs in the sky and the behavior of animals. She, in turn, showed him how to properly use the herbs he had been harvesting randomly, taught him which plants could treat fever, which could stop infection, which could be brewed into teas that would help a dozen different ailments. They worked side by side, and Hazel found herself watching him more than she probably should. Watching the way his muscles moved beneath his shirt when he split wood, the careful precision with which he skinned and butchered game, the gentleness in his large hands when he showed her how to set a snare or handle a knife. He was the most capable person she had ever met, but there was no arrogance in it. He simply did what needed to be done with quiet competence. For his part, Finn seemed to notice her growing comfort, the way her smiles came more easily, the way the fear gradually left her eyes. He never pressed her, never asked for more than she offered, but she caught him watching her sometimes when he thought she was not looking, an expression on his face that made her heart skip. One evening, nearly a month after she had arrived, they sat outside the cabin watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. The air was warm, and the sound of a creek bubbling nearby provided a peaceful backdrop. Hazel had been quiet most of the day, lost in thought. "What is on your mind?" Finn asked, his deep voice breaking the comfortable silence. "I was thinking about how different my life is now compared to a month ago. How strange it is that the worst thing that ever happened to me led to this, to being here with you." She glanced at him, suddenly shy. "Does that sound foolish?" "No," Finn said quietly. "It sounds honest. I have been thinking something similar. For 3 years I have lived alone, convinced I did not need anyone, that solitude was better than risking being betrayed again. But having you here has reminded me what I was missing, the sound of another voice, someone to share meals with, someone who understands what it means to be cast out through no fault of your own. Hazel's breath caught. Finn, I need to tell you something. My healing gift, it is not just that my hands get warm. When I touch someone who is injured, I can feel their pain, sense what is wrong inside them, and sometimes, when I touch someone healthy, I can feel other things, their emotions, their essence. She hesitated, then continued. When I touch you, I feel strength, safety, but I also feel loneliness, so much loneliness that it breaks my heart. Finn was quiet for a long moment. I did not know it showed. It does not show, not in how you act, but it is there, underneath everything. Hazel gathered her courage and reached out, placing her hand gently on his forearm. The warmth spread through her palm immediately, and with it came a rush of sensation, his fierce protectiveness, his buried hope that maybe this time things could be different, his growing feelings for her that he was trying so hard to keep hidden. You do not have to be lonely anymore. Finn looked down at her hand on his arm, then up at her face. In the fading light, his blue eyes were intense. Hazel, I am not good with words. I never have been. But you should know that having you here has changed things for me. You are not just someone I am helping. You are... He trailed off, seeming to struggle with the admission. I know, Hazel said softly. I feel it too. Every day I feel it more. You saved my life, Finn. Not just from the mob, but from a lifetime of fear and hiding. You gave me a place where I can be myself, where my gift is not something to fear, but something useful. You gave me a home, and somewhere along the way, you became more than my protector. You became the person I think about when I wake up, the person I look for first when something interesting happens. You became important to me. Finn turned his hand over beneath hers, his calloused palm rough against her skin. His fingers closed gently around her hand, dwarfing it. I told those men you were under my protection, but the truth is, I want you under more than my protection. I want you to stay not because you have nowhere else to go, but because you want to be here. With me. I know I am not much, just a man who lives in the woods, no prospects, no future beyond surviving each season, but I can offer you honesty and safety and whatever pieces of my heart I have left to give. Tears blurred Hazel's vision, but they were good tears, the kind that came from unexpected joy. You're not just a man who lives in the woods. You are the bravest, kindest, most honest man I have ever met. You faced down armed men for me. You gave up your solitude, your peace, to give me sanctuary. You taught me how to survive when I had nothing. You are everything, Finn. Do not you see that? He lifted his free hand slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and brushed his fingers against her cheek, wiping away a tear. I see you, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I see a woman who saved a child's life at risk to her own. I see someone who could have become bitter after being cast out, but instead learned to thrive. I see the person I want to wake up next to every morning for the rest of my life, if you will have me. Hazel leaned into his touch, then moved closer on the bench they shared. She was small compared to him, the top of her head barely reaching his shoulder, but when his arms came around her, she felt safer than she ever had in her life. I will have you, she whispered against his chest. I will stay with you, not because I must, but because there is nowhere else I would rather be. Finn held her as the last light faded from the sky and the stars began to emerge. Neither of them spoke for a long time, content simply to be close, to feel the reality of this new thing growing between them. When he finally tilted her face up to his and kissed her, it was gentle despite his size, questioning rather than demanding. Hazel answered by pressing closer, her hands coming up to tangle in his long hair, and felt the warmth of her gift spread between them, not healing anything physical, but mending something deeper, the broken trust and lonely years they had both endured. The summer passed in a blur of long days and warm nights. Hazel learned to set trap lines, to cure pelts, to track elk through the high meadows. Finn taught her to shoot with increasing accuracy, and she taught him to make medicines that would keep them healthy through the coming winter. They fell into domesticity with surprising ease, sharing the work and the cabin and eventually the bed, though Finn had been almost painfully careful with her at first, afraid his size and strength might hurt her. Hazel had laughed and pulled him close, whispering that she was not fragile, that she wanted him as much as he wanted her, and after that, any remaining barriers between them had fallen away. By the time the aspen leaves turned gold in late September, they had become a true partnership. Hazel was tougher than she had been when she arrived, her hands calloused from work, her aim true with a rifle. Finn was softer in some ways, quicker to smile, more likely to talk about his thoughts and feelings. They fit together in a way that felt inevitable, as if all the hardship and loneliness they had endured had been leading them to this clearing, this life, each other. But the specter of Gunnison still lingered. They had seen no one from town since that first confrontation, but both of them knew it was only a matter of time before someone returned. The town needed supplies from the high country, and traders occasionally passed through. Word would spread about the witch living with the mountain man, and not everyone would be content to let them be. The reckoning came on a crisp October morning when Finn returned from checking traplines to find Hazel in the garden, harvesting the last of the hardy vegetables before the first hard frost. He dismounted from his horse, his expression serious. "We have company coming. I saw 4 riders heading up the mountain trail. They will be here by afternoon." Hazel straightened, her hands full of turnips. "The town again?" "I do not think so. These men looked rough, more like bounty hunters than townspeople. Someone may have offered a reward for you, or at least spread word that there is a woman accused of witchcraft up here." Finn moved to her side, his hand resting on the pistol at his hip. "We should prepare for the worst." They spent the next few hours readying the cabin for a potential siege. Finn had planned for this possibility long before Hazel arrived, and the cabin had stout shutters that could be barred from inside, firing slits cut into the walls, and supplies cached to withstand weeks of isolation if necessary. But he did not want it to come to that. Violence had a way of escalating, and even if they drove off these men, more might follow. "Maybe I should leave," Hazel said as they worked. "Go deeper into the mountains, find somewhere remote where no one will look." "No," Finn said flatly. "We settled this already. You stay. We face this together, whatever comes. But if something happens to you because of me, I could not live with that. You have already risked so much." Finn stopped what he was doing and crossed to her, taking her shoulders gently in his large hands. "Listen to me. You are not a burden I am carrying out of charity. You are the woman I love, the person I intend to spend my life with. That means your fights are my fights. Your enemies are my enemies. I will not send you away to face danger alone any more than you would abandon me. We are in this together. Do you understand?" Hazel felt the now familiar warmth spread through her at his touch, felt the absolute conviction in his words. "I love you too," she said, the words still feeling new and precious on her tongue. "I just do not want to lose you." "You will not," Finn promised, then kissed her hard and quick. "Now help me move these water barrels. If this turns into a standoff, we will need them inside." The riders arrived just after noon, 4 rough-looking men on tired horses. Finn met them in the clearing with his rifle, while Hazel watched from a firing slit in the cabin wall, her own rifle loaded and ready. She had become a decent shot over the summer, and while she prayed she would not have to use it, she would if necessary. "That is close enough," Finn called out when the men were still 50 feet away. "State your business." The lead rider, a lean man with a scar running down one cheek, reined in his horse. "We heard there is a woman up here, a healer woman accused of witchcraft. We were told there is a reward for her return to town." "You heard wrong," Finn said calmly. "There is no one here but me. Turn around and leave." The scarred man smiled, but it was not friendly. "Now, we rode a long way on a tip that seemed pretty reliable. A woman named Hazel Reed. Small thing, dark hair, knows medicine and herbs. Sounds like you might have seen her." "Even if I had, I would not turn her over to scavengers looking to collect blood money. Find honest work and leave my mountain." One of the other riders, a thick-set man with mean eyes, spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "We do not take orders from hermits. We are taking the woman, and you can either step aside or get hurt." "I have warned you once," Finn said, his voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. I will not warn you again. Right away now, or I start shooting." The scarred man made a gesture, and the 4 riders began to spread out, clearly intending to surround the cabin. Finn did not hesitate. His first shot took the scarred man's horse in the shoulder, a deliberate warning that dropped the animal and sent its rider tumbling. The second shot kicked up dirt between the hooves of the thick-set man's mount, causing it to rear and nearly throw him. "Next one goes through flesh instead of past it," Finn shouted. "I can kill all 4 of you before you reach the tree line. Is the bounty worth dying for?" From inside the cabin, Hazel aimed her rifle through the firing slit, tracking the rider trying to flank them from the right. "I have the one moving east," she called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Just give me a reason." The riders froze, clearly not having expected resistance from inside the cabin as well. The scarred man, now on foot and limping, raised his hands. All right, we are leaving. No need for anyone to die today." "Smart choice," Finn said. "And when you get back to Gunnison or wherever you came from, spread the word. Hazel Reed is under the protection of Finn Shepard. Anyone else who comes looking for her will be dealt with permanently." "Am I clear?" The men gathered themselves, the scarred man catching his injured horse, and retreated down the mountain far faster than they had ascended. Finn watched until they were out of sight, then lowered his rifle and let out a long breath. Hazel emerged from the cabin, her own weapon still in her hands, adrenaline making her shake. "Do you think they will come back?" she asked. "Not those 4. They are mercenaries, not fanatics. But others might follow, especially if someone in town is paying." Finn turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "We need to end this permanently. I need to go to Gunnison and make it clear that pursuing you will have consequences." "You cannot go there," Hazel said immediately. "They could arrest you or worse. You threatened their authority when you sent the sheriff away. They will not forget that." "I am not suggesting I walk into the sheriff's office, but there are ways to make a point. I need to speak to the people who matter, the ones making decisions, the town council, the church leaders. Make them understand that continuing this witch hunt will cost them more than they are willing to pay." He saw her frightened expression and softened his tone. "I will not take unnecessary risks, but we cannot live the rest of our lives waiting for the next group of bounty hunters or angry townspeople. This needs to be settled." Hazel knew he was right, even though the thought of him going down to Gunnison made her heart clench with fear. "Then I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not. If anyone sees you in town, everything will escalate. You need to stay here, stay safe." "And what if they capture you? What if they decide you are too much trouble and just shoot you? Then what? I wait up here until I starve or freeze because I cannot manage alone through the winter?" Hazel stepped closer, her chin lifted stubbornly. "We are partners, Finn. You said so yourself. That means we face things together. Even the dangerous things, especially the dangerous things." They stared at each other for a long moment, wills clashing. Finally, Finn shook his head, something that might have been admiration in his eyes. "You are the most stubborn woman I have ever met. And you are the most overprotective man I have ever met. We are a good match." Hazel touched his arm gently. "We will be careful. We will go at night, speak to whoever we need to speak to, and get out. But we do it together." Finn pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "If anything happens to you, I will burn that town to the ground." "Nothing will happen to either of us," Hazel said with more confidence than she felt. "We are too smart and too stubborn to let them win." They waited until the following night, using the intervening day to plan. Finn knew which members of the town council might be reasonable, who held real power in Gunnison's social structure. They settled on approaching Matthias Grant, the owner of the largest general store, and a man known for his practicality over superstition. If anyone could be convinced to call off the hunt, it would be him. They rode down the mountain under a half-moon, moving quietly through the forest trails Finn knew by heart. Hazel wore dark clothes and kept her hair covered, and they both carried weapons. The town was mostly dark when they reached it, only a few windows showing lamplight. They tethered their horses on the outskirts and approached the Grant house on foot. Finn knocked quietly on the back door, his hand ready on his pistol in case of trouble. After a moment, the door cracked open, and Matthias Grant peered out, his graying hair disheveled and a lamp in his hand. His eyes widened when he saw Finn. "Shepard, What in blazes are you doing here? Do you know half the town wants your head for harboring that Reed woman? I need to talk to you, Matthias. 5 minutes. Hear me out and then decide what you want to do. Finn kept his voice low but urgent. Grant hesitated, then opened the door wider. Get inside before someone sees you, both of you, he added, having spotted Hazel in the shadows. They slipped into the kitchen, and Grant closed the door, setting the lamp on the table. You have about 3 minutes before my wife wakes up and starts asking questions. Talk fast. Call off the bounty on Hazel Reed, Finn said bluntly. Convince the council to let this witch hunt die. She saved a child's life and harmed no one. Continuing to pursue her is pointless and will only lead to bloodshed. The town is scared, Shepard. People believe she is a witch, that she will bring curses or evil down on us all. Luther Barnes has been preaching hellfire every Sunday about the dangers of allowing such evil to persist. Grant looked at Hazel, his expression not hostile but wary. I'm not saying I believe it, but calming that kind of fear is not easy. Then show them reason, Hazel said quietly, speaking for the first time. Mr. Grant, I healed Timothy Walsh. I can heal others. What if instead of viewing my gift as evil, the town saw it as useful? I could help people, treat injuries and illnesses that would otherwise kill or cripple. All I want is to live in peace. I am not asking to return to Gunnison. I am asking that you stop sending people to hunt me. Grant rubbed his face tiredly. And if I refuse? If I tell the sheriff you are here right now? Finn's hand moved to his pistol. Then we leave, and the next person who comes up my mountain looking for her dies, and the one after that. And eventually, there will be enough blood spilled that even you will not be able to explain it away as righteous justice. Is that what you want? That sounds like a threat. It is a promise, Finn said coldly. I'm not a violent man by nature, Matthias, but I will protect what is mine. Hazel is mine. That cabin is mine. My life is mine, and I will kill anyone who tries to take them from me. But I would rather not. I would rather we all walk away from this and live our lives. That is why I came here to talk instead of just fortifying my cabin and waiting for the next attack. Grant was silent for a long moment, his eyes moving between them. Finally, he sighed. You put me in a difficult position, but I will talk to the council. I will argue that pursuing this further is a waste of resources and could lead to unnecessary violence. Barnes will fight me on it, but there are others who might see reason. I cannot promise anything, but I will try. That is all I am asking, Finn said, relaxing slightly. Convince them it is over. Tell them Hazel has disappeared into the deep wilderness, that she is likely dead from the cold or animals. Give them a story they can accept and move on from. And in return, you promise that this Reed woman will not come back to Gunnison? That she will not use her supposed powers on anyone in town? She will stay on the mountain with me, Finn confirmed. She has no desire to return. But Matthias, you should know something. That boy she healed, Timothy Walsh, he was dying. His ribs were crushed, his lungs filling with blood. Without her, he would have been dead within the hour. She saved his life, and his father repaid her with accusations and mob violence. If the town can live with that injustice, then I suppose there is nothing more to say. Grant looked at Hazel, really looked at her, and she met his gaze steadily. Whatever he saw there seemed to satisfy something, because he nodded slowly. Go. Get out of town before dawn. I will do what I can, but you need to hold up your end. No more trouble. Thank you, Hazel said softly. I know this is not easy for you, but you are doing the right thing. They left the way they came, moving quickly and quietly through the dark streets. Hazel's heart did not stop pounding until they were well into the forest, the town disappearing behind them. Finn kept them moving at a steady pace, not relaxing until they reached the cabin as the first light of dawn was painting the eastern sky. Do you think he will keep his word? Hazel asked as they unsaddled the horses. Matthias Grant is a pragmatist. He will argue our case because it makes sense to him economically and practically. Whether he wins that argument depends on how much power Luther Barnes and his ilk have over the council. Finn secured the horses and turned to her. But at least we tried, and we made it clear that we will not be easy targets. Sometimes that's enough. The weeks that followed were tense. Finn kept a constant watch, and they both slept lighter, weapons close at hand. But no one came. October faded into November, and the first real snows began to fall, dusting the high country in white. Still, no riders appeared on the trail. By the time December arrived and the passes began to close with deep snow, Hazel allowed herself to believe that maybe Grant had succeeded, that maybe the town had decided to let them be. Winter in the high country was harsh but beautiful. The cabin became their entire world, snowbound and isolated. They had prepared well, with meat cured and vegetables stored, firewood stacked high against the outer wall. Finn taught Hazel to make snowshoes and how to move through deep drifts without exhausting herself. She taught him card games her father had shown her and read to him from the few books she had brought, her voice soft in the firelight. It was during those long winter nights that their relationship deepened further. They had fallen in love during the summer and autumn, but the enforced intimacy of winter, the reliance on each other for companionship and entertainment and warmth, forged something even stronger. They talked about everything, their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Finn admitted that he had never thought he would trust anyone again after what happened in Wyoming, but Hazel had changed that. Hazel confessed that she had spent most of her life feeling like a burden or a danger, but with Finn, she finally felt like she belonged. On Christmas Eve, Finn surprised her with a gift, a necklace made from a polished stone he had found in the creek, its surface smooth and shot through with veins of gold. He had spent weeks in secret working it into a pendant, drilling a hole and stringing it on a leather cord. "It is not much," he said as he fastened it around her neck, "but I wanted you to have something beautiful, something that will remind you that you are treasured." Hazel touched the stone, her eyes bright with tears. "I love it. I love you. I never thought I would have this, a home, someone who cares about me, a future. You gave me all of it." "We gave it to each other," Finn said, pulling her into his arms. "You saved my life just as much as I saved yours. I was half dead up here, just going through the motions. You brought me back to life." That night, with the snow falling softly outside and the fire crackling in the hearth, Finn asked her to marry him. He had no ring, no fancy words prepared, just his heart in his eyes and his voice rough with emotion. "I want you to be my wife. I want to stand before anyone who will listen and claim you as mine and be claimed by you in return. Will you marry me, Hazel Reed?" Hazel did not hesitate. Yes. 1,000 times yes. They married themselves that night, speaking vows in front of the fire with no witnesses except the wilderness beyond the walls. In the absence of a preacher, they made their own promises, to love and protect each other, to face whatever came together, to build a life in this harsh, beautiful place. Finn produced a simple gold band that had belonged to his mother, the only thing of value he had carried with him from his old life, and slipped it onto Hazel's finger. She had nothing to give him in return except herself, but it was enough. It was more than enough. When spring finally arrived, breaking the snow's grip on the high country, Hazel realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but the confirmation came when she woke one morning violently ill, barely making it outside before losing her stomach. Finn held her hair back and rubbed her shoulders, concern etched on his face. "I'm all right," Hazel managed once the worst had passed. "It is just morning sickness." Finn went very still. "Morning sickness? You mean you are with child?" Hazel nodded, suddenly nervous about his reaction. They had never discussed children, had been too focused on survival and building their life together. "I am. Probably 3 months along, maybe more. Are you—" She trailed off, afraid to finish the question. Finn swept her up in his arms with a whoop of joy that startled birds from the nearby trees. He spun her around carefully, then set her down and kissed her thoroughly. "Are you happy?" "Of course I am happy. We are going to have a baby, Hazel, a family." Relief and joy flooded through her. "I was afraid you might think it was too soon, or that it would make things harder." "It probably will make things harder," Finn admitted, "but I cannot think of anything I want more than a child with you. We will figure it out. We always do." They spent the spring and summer preparing. Finn built a cradle from pine wood, sanding it smooth so no splinter could harm delicate skin. Hazel sewed baby clothes from soft fabric, trading some of Finn's furs to a traveling merchant for material and thread. They discussed names endlessly, finally settling on Fletcher if it was a boy and Hope if it was a girl. In late August, on a warm afternoon when thunderstorms rolled across the peaks, Hazel went into labor. Finn had already ridden down to a settlement 10 miles south of Gunnison to fetch a midwife, a woman named Mrs. Carson, who had agreed to come despite the rumors about Hazel. She arrived just as the contractions became serious, a stout, practical woman who took one look at the situation and immediately took charge. The labor was long and difficult. Hazel had helped women give birth before, had used her healing gift to ease their pain and strengthen them, but doing it for herself was different. She could not focus her gift inward, could not ease her own agony. She could only endure, gripping Finn's hand so hard she thought she might break his fingers, breathing through each contraction as Mrs. Carson urged her to push. Finn stayed with her the entire time, despite the midwife's suggestion that he wait outside as most men did. "I am not leaving her," he said flatly, and that was the end of the discussion. He wiped the sweat from Hazel's face, murmured encouragement, and let her curse him for getting her pregnant in the first place without complaint. Finally, as the sun set and painted the cabin's interior in shades of gold and amber, their son was born. He came into the world screaming, healthy and strong, and when Mrs. Carson placed him on Hazel's chest, she burst into tears of exhaustion and overwhelming love. Finn leaned over them both, his large hand gentle on the baby's tiny head, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Fletcher," Hazel whispered, studying the small face, the dark hair plastered to his scalp, the miniature fists waving. Our son, Finn repeated, his voice thick with emotion. "He is perfect." Mrs. Carson stayed for 3 days to ensure both mother and baby were healthy, then departed with payment in furs and Hazel's profound gratitude. Before she left, she took Hazel aside. "I want you to know, I do not believe the things they say about you in town. I have birthed more babies than I can count, and I have seen my share of strange things. Whatever gift you have, it is not evil. That boy of yours is blessed to have a mother who can heal." "Thank you," Hazel said, touched by the woman's words. "Thank you for coming, for helping us. If you ever need anything, you send your man to fetch me. I do not care what the town thinks. A baby is a baby, and a mother is a mother. You take care of that little one." The first year of Fletcher's life was exhausting and wonderful. He was a healthy baby, growing quickly, and both parents were besotted with him. Finn proved to be a surprisingly gentle father, his large hands careful when holding his son, his deep voice softening when he sang old trapping songs as lullabies. Hazel watched him cradle Fletcher against his broad chest and felt her heart swell with love for both of them. They had no further trouble from Gunnison. Whatever Matthias Grant had said or done had apparently worked, or perhaps the town had simply moved on to other concerns. Occasionally they saw travelers or traders passing through the high country, and sometimes those people stopped at the cabin for a night's shelter or to trade. Word spread slowly. The mountain man and his healer wife would help those in need, but they kept to themselves and expected to be left in peace. Fletcher grew into a bright, curious toddler with his mother's dark hair and his father's blue eyes. He learned to walk holding onto his father's fingers, taking wobbling steps across the cabin floor. He learned to speak in the curious mix of formal language Hazel used and the more rough-hewn phrases Finn employed. His first word was "dada," and Finn had looked so proud Hazel thought he might burst. When Fletcher was 2, Hazel found herself pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, her body knowing what to expect. They welcomed a daughter in the spring, a tiny thing with a surprisingly loud cry. They named her Grace, and she seemed determined from the start to live up to her name, a peaceful baby who rarely fussed. The years flowed past like the creek beside the cabin, steady and constant. Fletcher learned to set snares and track animals, following his father through the forest with determined steps. Grace showed signs of having inherited Hazel's healing gift, her small hands growing warm when she touched hurt creatures, her intuition guiding her to the right herbs in Hazel's garden. They were a family, complete and happy in their isolated mountain home. But isolation could not last forever. When Fletcher was 6 and Grace 4, a messenger arrived at the cabin, a young man on an exhausted horse who had clearly ridden hard. He dismounted and approached cautiously, hands visible and empty of weapons. Finn met him with a rifle, but the messenger quickly spoke. "Huh, Mr. Shepard. My name is Daniel Carson. My mother was the midwife who helped at your son's birth. She sent me. There is trouble in the valley. A fever has broken out, killing people. The town doctor is dead and they have no one else who knows medicine. My mother is old now and cannot manage alone. She asked me to come find Mrs. Shepard, to beg for her help." Finn looked at Hazel, who had emerged from the cabin with both children. "It could be a trap. Or it could be people dying who need help," Hazel said quietly. She studied the young man, using her gift to sense his intention. All she felt was desperation and fear. "How bad is it?" "A dozen dead already, maybe more. Children mostly, and old folk. It is some kind of lung fever. People cannot breathe. They drown in their own fluids." Daniel's voice cracked. "My little sister is sick. She's only 5. My mother has tried everything, but she doesn't have your gift. Please, Mrs. Shepard, I know the town treated you badly once, but these are innocent people dying. Children." Hazel felt the old familiar pull, the need to help warring with the knowledge of danger. She looked at Finn, saw the concern in his eyes, but also the trust. Whatever she decided, he would support her. She looked at her own children, imagined them sick and dying, while someone who could help refused out of fear or resentment. "I will come," she said, "but my family comes with me. I will not be separated from them." "Of course," Daniel said quickly. "Whatever you need, just please hurry." They packed quickly, Hazel gathering her herbs and medicines, Finn loading weapons and supplies. Within an hour, they were riding down the mountain, Daniel leading the way. Fletcher rode in front of Finn on his large horse, eyes wide with excitement at the adventure. Grace was secured in a carrier on Hazel's back, her small hands gripping her mother's shirt. The valley settlement was called Red Creek, about 15 miles from Gunnison and serving as a farming community. When they arrived, the evidence of the fever was everywhere. Houses marked with red cloth to indicate sickness, the smell of burning herbs and desperate prayers. Mrs. Carson met them at the edge of town, tears of relief streaming down her weathered face. "Bless you for coming," she said, gripping Hazel's hands. "I know what it costs you to return to this valley, but these people need you." Hazel surveyed the situation quickly. The fever was indeed serious, a lung infection that was overwhelming people's ability to fight it. But it was not magic that was needed, just good medicine, and her gift to strengthen the sickest patients. She set up in the church, the largest building in the settlement, and began to work. Finn stayed close, protective, watching for any sign of hostility or danger. But what he saw instead was gratitude. As Hazel moved from patient to patient, laying her glowing hands on fevered chests, helping them breathe easier, the people of Red Creek looked at her with awe rather than fear. She saved Daniel Carson's little sister, a tiny girl named Emma who had been barely clinging to life. She saved an old man who reminded her painfully of her father. She saved a young mother with a newborn baby who would have died without her intervention. She worked for 3 days straight, sleeping only in brief snatches while Finn watched over their children. She used her gift until she was exhausted, until the glow faded to barely a flicker, and still she pushed herself. Finally, when the last patient was past the crisis point, she collapsed. Finn caught her before she hit the ground, lifting her easily in his arms. "She needs rest," he told the gathered townspeople, his voice brooking no argument. "She has given everything she has to help you. Now you give her a safe place to recover." They were given the best room in the settlement's boarding house, a comfortable space with a real bed and clean linens. Hazel slept for 18 hours straight while Finn kept watch, and the children played quietly, understanding that Mama needed rest. When she finally woke, she found Finn sitting beside the bed, Fletcher and Grace curled up asleep at the foot. "How many died?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "None that you treated. You saved them all." Finn helped her sit up, offering her water. "The whole town is talking about the miracle healer. They want to thank you properly, have some kind of ceremony." "No ceremony," Hazel said quickly. "I just want to go home. Are we safe to leave?" "We are more than safe. We are practically revered. Mrs. Carson has been telling everyone who will listen that you are a gift from God, not a witch. The town elders want to apologize for how you were treated before, want to invite you to return to Gunnison and practice healing there." Finn's expression made it clear what he thought of that idea. "I have no interest in returning to Gunnison or anywhere else. Our home is on the mountain." Hazel looked at her sleeping children, at the man she loved watching over them. Did I do the right thing? Coming here? You saved lives. You showed people that your gift is something beautiful, not something to fear. And you showed our children what it means to help others even when it is hard or scary. Finn took her hand gently. Yes, love. You did the right thing. They left Red Creek 2 days later, laden with gifts from grateful families, preserved foods, new clothes for the children, tools and supplies. The entire settlement turned out to see them off, people calling blessings and thanks. As they rode back up into the mountains, Hazel felt something inside her finally settle, an old wound closing. She had faced the fear and hate of people before, and survived. Now she had faced their gratitude, and that had been harder in some ways, but ultimately healing. The years continued to pass in their mountain sanctuary. Fletcher grew tall and strong like his father, learning the ways of the wilderness. Grace developed her healing gift, and Hazel taught her everything she knew, passing on her grandmother's knowledge. They occasionally received visitors now, people who had heard of the healer in the high country and came seeking help. Hazel treated those who needed it, never turning anyone away, but she and Finn maintained their privacy and independence. When Fletcher turned 14, he announced his intention to become a trapper like his father. Finn was proud but insistent that his son finish learning to read and write properly first. The wilderness will always be here, he told Fletcher. But education is something you cannot get back if you miss it. Your mother did not teach you letters for you to ignore them. Grace, at 12, was already helping her mother with complex healing work, her gift growing stronger each year. She had her mother's gentle nature, but her father's stubbornness, a combination that served her well. She talked about maybe becoming a real doctor someday, going to a city to study medicine formally. If that is what you want, we will find a way to make it happen, Hazel told her. You should never hide your gift like I had to. The world is changing. Maybe someday people like us will not have to fear. One evening in late summer, when the children were asleep and Hazel and Finn sat outside watching the stars, he took her hand. They were both well into their 40s now, his hair streaked with gray, her face lined from years of sun and wind and smiling. But when she looked at him, she still saw the man who had offered her sanctuary when she had nowhere else to go, who had stood between her and danger without hesitation. Do you ever regret it? Finn asked quietly. Staying here, living this hard life instead of finding somewhere easier? Not once, Hazel said honestly. Not even for a moment. You gave me everything, Finn. A home, a family, the freedom to be myself. You gave me love when I thought no one would ever see past what I could do to who I was. How could I regret that? I was thinking today about the first time I saw you, standing in the trees watching my cabin like a frightened deer. I remember thinking you were the bravest person I had ever met, running into the wilderness alone rather than letting fear defeat you. Finn lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. I did not know then that you would become my whole world, that 20 years later I would still wake up every morning, grateful you chose to stay. You told those men I was under your protection, Hazel said, remembering. But the truth is, we have always protected each other. We built this life together, survived together, raised our children together. Everything good in my life came from the day I stumbled into your clearing. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only came from years of deep companionship. In the distance, an elk bugled, and the wind rustled through the aspens. Inside the cabin, their children slept safe and warm. It was not the life Hazel had imagined for herself all those years ago when she had fled Gunnison in terror. It was better. It was real and hard and beautiful, filled with love and purpose. The town had marked her as a witch, had driven her into the wilderness to die or disappear. Instead, she had found a man who had looked at her gift and said, "Then bewitch me. I am willing." And she had, not with magic or curses, but with love and partnership and the determination to build something good from the ashes of fear and persecution. As the stars wheeled overhead and the mountain night deepened around them, Hazel leaned against Finn's shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the warmth of his arm around her. They had faced everything the world threw at them and emerged stronger. Their love had been forged in hardship and tempered by time, and it would last for whatever years remained to them. The mountain had been their sanctuary, their fortress, their home. But more than that, It had been the place where two wounded souls had found each other and discovered that together they could overcome anything. The town had called her a witch, but she had become something far more powerful. A healer, a wife, a mother, a woman who knew her own worth and lived life on her own terms. And that, Hazel thought, as she felt Finn press a kiss to the top of her head, was the best magic of all. When Fletcher turned 16, he took his first long trapping expedition with his father, a 3-week journey into the deepest wilderness. They returned with a rich haul of furs, and with Fletcher having proven himself capable of surviving on his own. Finn looked at his son with unmistakable pride, seeing himself at that age, but better, softer, more educated and thoughtful. Grace continued to develop her healing abilities, and word spread further about the mother-daughter healers in the high country. A doctor from Denver even made the journey to meet them, a progressive man named Dr. Harrison, who was fascinated by Hazel's gift. He offered to sponsor Grace's medical education if she wanted to pursue formal training. "The world needs healers like you, Doctor," Harrison told Grace, watching as she treated a trader's infected wound with a combination of herbal poultice and her warming hands. "People are starting to understand that folk medicine and healing gifts are not evil or superstitious, but real tools that can work alongside modern medicine. You could help change minds, show people what is possible." Grace looked to her parents, and they nodded encouragement. "It is your choice," Hazel said. "Your gift is yours to use as you see fit. If you want to study in the city, learn from doctors, we will support you. But if you want to stay here and practice as I have, that is equally valid." In the end, Grace decided to spend a year in Denver, studying with Dr. Harrison, then return to the mountains. She did not want to leave her home forever, but she wanted to learn everything she could. When she departed that autumn, tears streaming down her face as she hugged her family goodbye, Hazel felt the bittersweet ache of watching a child step into her own future. "She will be fine," Finn said, holding Hazel as they watched Grace's wagon disappear down the trail. "She is strong like her mother." Fletcher stayed, continuing to learn the trapping trade and helping his father with the work that was becoming harder as Finn aged. They talked sometimes about Fletcher finding a wife, but he seemed in no hurry. "I want what you and Mama have," he told his father one night, "a real partnership, not just a marriage of convenience. I will wait until I find that." The years continued their steady march. Grace returned from Denver after a year, her head full of knowledge but her heart still belonging to the mountains. She set up her own healing practice in Red Creek, the settlement that had first welcomed her mother. She visited often, bringing news and medical supplies, and occasionally a young man she was courting, a farmer's son named Thomas Miller, who looked at her with such obvious adoration that Hazel had to hide her smiles. Fletcher eventually met a young woman named Sarah, the daughter of a trapper from farther north. She was tough and capable, comfortable in the wilderness, and when Fletcher brought her to meet his parents, Hazel knew immediately that this was the right match. They married in a simple ceremony at the cabin, with Grace and Thomas traveling up from Red Creek to attend. Finn and Hazel became grandparents twice over within a few years, Fletcher and Sarah having 2 sons in quick succession, while Grace and Thomas welcomed twin daughters. The cabin that had once held just 2 people now rang with laughter and children's voices whenever the family gathered, which they did as often as the weather and distance allowed. On their 30th anniversary, Finn gave Hazel a new gift, a beautifully carved wooden box he had spent months creating in secret. Inside were 30 small tokens, one for each year, each with a memory carved or burned into the wood. A cabin for their first home, a baby's cradle, a horse for their rides together, a flower for her garden. Each piece was a small work of art, and as Hazel examined them, tears streamed down her face. 30 years, Finn said softly. "The best 30 years of my life. You have given me everything, Hazel. A purpose, a family, love that I never thought I would have again. I wanted you to have something that showed you how much every year, every day has meant to me." "You sentimental fool," Hazel said, laughing through her tears and pulling him into a kiss. "I love it. I love you. Even after 30 years, I love you more than I did the day before." They were in their 50s now, their bodies showing the wear of hard mountain living, but their spirits still strong. Finn's hair had gone fully silver, but he was still powerfully built, still capable of working from dawn to dusk. Hazel's hands showed the scars of countless healing sessions and years of hard work, but they still glowed with warmth when needed, her gift undiminished by age. The town of Gunnison had changed over the years. Luther Barnes had died, his fire and brimstone preaching replaced by a younger, more progressive minister who preached compassion and understanding. Many of the people who had been part of the mob that drove Hazel away were dead or moved on, and the new generation knew her only as the legendary healer who lived in the high country. Occasionally, delegations would arrive asking her to return, to practice in town where she could help more people, but she always politely declined. "This is my home," she would tell them, gesturing to the mountains and forest. "This is where I belong. If people need my help, they know where to find me." One autumn day, when the aspens were gold and the air smelled of coming snow, Matthias Grant made the journey up the mountain. He was an old man now, in his 70s, moving slowly with the aid of a walking stick. Finn helped him into the cabin and gave him a chair by the fire while Hazel prepared tea. "I wanted to come see you before I die," Grant said bluntly, accepting the cup with gnarled hands. "To tell you that I was wrong all those years ago. I should have done more to stop the town from hunting you. I should have stood up to Barnes and the others, made them see reason from the start. Instead, I took the easy path, did the minimum. That has weighed on me." "You did what you could," Hazel said gently. "You convinced the council to call off the bounty. You helped end it. That took courage." "Not enough courage, not nearly enough." Grant looked at her with watery eyes. "But I see now what you have built here. I hear the stories about the lives you have saved, the children you have healed. Your daughter continues your work in Red Creek. Your son is known as an honest trader and skilled trapper. You created something good from the injustice done to you. That is worth more than anything I did." Finn spoke up from where he stood by the mantle. "The past is past. Matthias, you came all this way to make peace. Consider it made. We hold no grudges." Grant nodded slowly, seeming relieved. He stayed for several hours, sharing news from the valley, talking about how the world was changing. The railroad would reach Gunnison within a year or two. There was talk of Colorado becoming a state. The wild days were ending, civilization pressing in from all sides. When he finally prepared to leave, Hazel gave him medicine for his rheumatism and placed her hands on his shoulders, letting warmth flow into his tired body. He straightened slightly, some of the pain leaving his face. "That is a blessing, what you can do," he said. "Never let anyone tell you different." After he left, Hazel stood in the doorway watching the sun set over the mountains, Finn's arm around her shoulders. "Do you think we will see him again?" "Probably not. He made his peace. That is what he came for." Finn pulled her closer. "But we will be fine. We have always been fine." More years passed, bringing changes but not diminishing the core of what Hazel and Finn had built. They grew older, their children grew families of their own, and the mountain remained constant. The cabin was expanded to accommodate family visits, a second structure built nearby where Fletcher and Sarah could stay when they came. When Hazel turned 60, her hair silver and her face lined, but her eyes still bright, Grace organized a celebration. The entire family gathered, children, grandchildren, even a few great-grandchildren from Fletcher's boys. The clearing rang with laughter and music, and Hazel felt such overwhelming gratitude for the life she had lived. That night, after everyone had bedded down in various places throughout the expanded homestead, Hazel and Finn walked alone under the stars as they had so many times before. They moved slower now, Finn's limp more pronounced from an old injury that had never quite healed right, but they still made the circuit of the clearing, still took comfort in each other's presence. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day?" Hazel asked, taking his hand. "When I told you I could heal people and you asked if I was a witch?" "I said, 'Then bewitch me. I am willing,'" Finn replied, the memory clear even after all these years. "And you did. From that moment on, I was yours." "We bewitched each other," Hazel corrected, "with love, with trust, with the life we built together. The town thought they were cursing me when they drove me away, but they gave me the greatest gift. They sent me to you." Finn stopped walking and turned to face her, his large hands gentle on her face. Even now, after so many years, his touch made her heart flutter. "I will love you until my last breath, Hazel Shepard. And if there is anything beyond that, I will love you there too." "And I will love you the same," Hazel whispered, standing on her toes to kiss him, their bodies fitting together as perfectly as they had for more than 3 decades. The seasons continued their eternal cycle. Fletcher took over more of the trapping as Finn's strength finally began to wane in his late 60s. Grace became known throughout the region as a gifted healer, her reputation spreading far beyond Red Creek. She took on apprentices, teaching others her mother's methods, ensuring that the knowledge would continue. Finn passed away peacefully in his sleep one winter night, his hand in Hazel's, having lived to see 72 years and leaving behind a legacy of love and family. Hazel mourned him deeply, but without regret. They had been given 38 years together, far more than many couples received, and every one of those years had been filled with love. She lived several more years after Finn's death, staying in the cabin with Fletcher and Sarah, teaching her grandchildren everything she knew about healing and herbs. She passed away on a spring morning, the mountains she loved visible through the window, surrounded by family. Her last words were, "Tell him I am coming. Tell Finn I will be right there." They buried her beside Finn in a clearing overlooking the valley, the mountains rising around them like cathedral walls. The family marked the graves with simple stones, carving their names and the dates that measured their time on earth. But they also carved something else, the words that had defined their love from the very beginning. She was marked as a witch. He said, "Then bewitch me, I am willing." And together they built a life of magic. Grace and Fletcher ensured their parents' story was remembered, told to grandchildren and great-grandchildren, to apprentice healers and young trappers learning their trade. The cabin remained in the family, preserved as a reminder of what two people could build when they chose love over fear, partnership over isolation. The story of Hazel Reed and Finn Shepard became legend in the region, whispered about in the same breath as tales of mountain lions and gold strikes and the tough pioneers who carved civilization from wilderness. But for those who had known them, who had witnessed their love firsthand, it was not legend, but simple truth. They had been marked by their times, she as a witch and he as an outcast, but they had transformed those marks into something beautiful. Their love had been tested by fear, by distance, by the hardship of mountain living, and it had emerged unbreakable. They had created a family that would carry their values forward for generations, teaching the importance of helping others, of standing against injustice, of choosing compassion over cruelty. And in the high country of Colorado, in the shadow of the Elk Mountains, their spirits remained, in the warmth of a healer's hands, in the quiet competence of a trapper reading the forest's signs, in the courage it took to face down fear and choose love instead. They had lived, they had loved, and they had left the world better than they found it. What more could anyone ask from a life well lived? What greater magic existed than the love of two souls finding each other against all odds and choosing every single day to stay together? The mountain remained constant and eternal, a fitting monument to a love that had conquered everything thrown against it. And somewhere, in the whisper of wind through the aspens, in the burble of the creek, in the silence of deep winter snow, their story continued, an eternal promise that love, when true and deep and freely given, could overcome any obstacle, endure any hardship, and create miracles that no amount of fear or ignorance could diminish. They had been willing to be bewitched by each other, and in that willingness had found everything worth living for.